imagine, just for a second, having hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank.
Right, like total, absolute financial invincibility.
Exactly. You have complete freedom, absolute security, and a spotless reputation as this, titan of industry.
The dream.
Right. But now, imagine risking a federal prison sentence, your entire legacy, and literally everything you own, just to make a fraction of a percent more on your net worth.
It sounds completely insane when you put it like that.
It does, but that is exactly what Rajat Gupta did. I mean, this guy was orphaned as a teenager in Kolkata, right?
Yeah.
He built this massively successful career from the ground up, became the CEO of McKinsey, sat on the board of Goldman Sachs, and made hundreds of millions entirely legally.
He was the literal definition of having made it.
Totally. But he threw it all away.
Yeah.
He went to prison for an insider trading scheme that netted him, I think it was just $1 million.
Yeah, a rounding error for him.
Yeah.
Right. He had absolutely everything, but he desperately needed more. And that right there is the exact problem that, you and I and everyone listening are running into.
The sheer irrationality of that decision is just staggering, like risking total ruin for what is essentially pennies to him. It highlights this really profound blind spot we have about wealth.
Yeah.
We operate under this baseline assumption that accumulating more resources eventually leads to a feeling of satiation, but the Gupta case proves that the opposite is often true.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive, everybody. Our mission today is to take a stack of just incredible sources. We're looking at Morgan House's The Psychology of Money, Bill Perkins' Die with Zero, Vicki Robbins' Your Money or Your Life, and this really fascinating Wharton study on intertemporal choice to figure out exactly why high earners almost never actually feel rich.
It's a huge paradox.
It is. But okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I'm looking at this stack of research, and honestly, this whole idea of reaching a point of enough just sounds like a nice utopian delusion.
How so?
Well, I mean, human beings are biologically hardwired by evolution to gather resources, right? Like, if a prehistoric human just stopped gathering berries because they felt they had enough, they starved during the first harsh winter.
Yeah. Nature doesn't really reward complacency.
Exactly. So telling modern people to just, reach a point where they genuinely don't want more, it feels like we're trying to fight millions of years of evolution. I just don't see how it's practically possible.
I mean, you're entirely correct about the evolutionary hardware. We are completely programmed to hoard for survival. But what's fascinating here is the contrarian thesis that really emerges when you synthesize all these financial frameworks together.
Okay, what is it?
It's that more money doesn't actually fix the never enough feeling in the modern world. It actually amplifies it.
Wait, having more money makes you want more money.
Yes. These sources argue that enough isn't some magical dollar figure that you inevitably hit once your bank account gets large enough. It's a skill.
Yeah.
And it's a highly psychological skill that the wealthy rarely ever develop because, frankly, society constantly validates their hoarding.
Oh, because everyone praises you for getting richer.
Exactly. Without a deliberately constructed ceiling, every single dollar you earn just creates more anxiety because the finish line just keeps moving further and further away.
I hear you calling it a skill,
Yeah.
but the default human setting is to keep raising the roof on our own expectations. Like, how does that mechanism actually work? Because Morgan Housel uses a very visceral analogy for this in his book.
Oh, the eating analogy.
Yeah, it's gross, but it's so accurate. He points out that the only way to truly know how much food you can eat is to just keep eating until you are physically sick and vomiting.
Right.
And we all understand how absurd and damaging that is with our diets, right? No rational person tests their... But we do the exact equivalent with our wealth and our ambitions. We just keep consuming and working until the stress and the maintenance of that wealth actively hurts us.
Yeah, the psychological mechanism driving that behavior is deeply, deeply rooted in how we perceive time and identity.
Okay, how so?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we really have to look at that Wharton study on, what was it called? Psychological connectedness and intertemporal choice.
Right, the Bartels and Rips study?
Yeah. The researchers were trying to understand intertemporal choice, which is basically how we make decisions that span across time. Like, why would you choose a smaller financial payout today rather than a much larger one in the future?
The classic marshmallow test kind of thing.
Exactly. So they ran these experiments measuring psychological connectedness, and they found something just incredible. The human brain actually struggles to simulate continuity when projecting decades ahead.
Meaning what? Exactly.
Meaning you intellectually know that you will be the same person in 20 years, right? But emotionally, your brain processes your distant future self. using the exact same neural pathways it uses to process a complete stranger.
Wait, a stranger. Like when I try to picture myself at age 70, my brain is reacting the same way it would if I were thinking about some random guy walking down the street.
Functionally, yes. That is exactly what happens.
That is wild.
They found that when people anticipate large, life-changing events, things that will fundamentally alter their personality or their values or their daily routines, they experience this severe drop in connectedness to that future self.
Because they can't recognize that person anymore.
Right. And because you cannot emotionally connect with that future version of you, you refuse to save resources for them. I mean, why would you sacrifice your present-day comfort to give money to a stranger?
You wouldn't.
Exactly. You naturally prioritize immediate, visible status today over the long-term peace of a person you literally haven't met yet.
Wow. Okay, that completely reframes the man in the car paradox from our sources.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we've all had that moment, right? You're sitting at a stoplight, and this incredibly sleek $100,000 sports car pulls up next to you.
And you stare at it.
Right. But you almost never look at the driver and think, wow, that guy is so cool and successful. You look at the car and imagine yourself in the driver's seat.
The irony there is just palpable.
It is. The person who bought the car likely did it thinking everyone would admire them. But in reality, they're just a prop in a fantasy where other people are admiring themselves.
Yeah.
So if my future self is a stranger to my brain, I'm not going to sacrifice my wealth to secure his retirement. I'm going to sacrifice his wealth to buy present-day admiration that doesn't even actually exist. I mean, I'm trading real security for fake applause.
That is the ultimate trap of the brain's relative reward system. We measure our success not by our absolute wealth, but by our wealth relative to the people around us.
Which is a game you can never win.
Never. And this raises a really important question for anyone listening. What happens when you never intervene? Like, if you never develop this skill of enough, what is the actual terminal cost?
Right.
Because the data shows it is not just, a lingering sense of malaise or dissatisfaction. The terminal cost of a never enough mindset is catastrophic ruin.
Which brings us right back to Rajat Gupta sitting in a federal prison.
Exactly. Gupta or Bernie Madoff, who ran the largest Ponzi scheme in history despite already being wildly wealthy from a totally legitimate market-making business.
He was already rich.
He was. But I think the starkest historical example is from the 1929 stock market crash. We really have to look at the contrasting fates of Jesse Livermore and Abraham Germansky.
Okay, remind me about Germansky.
Germansky was a multi-millionaire real estate developer. He aggressively leveraged his wealth to buy stocks in the roaring 20s. And when the market collapsed, he was completely wiped out. He famously disappeared, leaving a suicide note.
God, a really tragic outcome. But unfortunately, a very common story for the 1929 crash, right? People who bet wrong just lost everything.
True. But Jesse Livermore bet right.
Oh, the short seller.
Yes. Livermore was a genius trader. He famously shorted the market, predicting the decline. So on the very day that ruined Germansky, Livermore made the modern equivalent of $3 billion.
$3 billion.
In a single day. He was the undisputed king of Wall Street. He had more money than he could ever spend in 100 lifetimes.
But because he didn't have the skill of enough, that $3 billion wasn't a finish line.
No, it was just a new starting line. Livermore had absolutely no psychological ceiling. He had no mechanism in his brain to say, I have won the game. It is time to stop playing.
So what did he do?
Well, overflowing with the confidence of this massive windfall, he kept making larger, increasingly reckless bets. He took on massive debt, and just a few years later, he lost the entire $3 billion, went completely bankrupt, and tragically, he also took his own life. Both men experienced opposite sides of the greatest financial crash in history. One lost, one won big. But they met the exact same fate, because neither possessed the capacity to stop.
That is just a chilling reality check. And it makes me think about Ronald Read.
Oh, the janitor?
Yeah. Because if the terminal cost of hoarding without a ceiling is ruin, is the only way to win to simply, refuse to play the Wall Street game entirely? Ronald Read was literally a janitor and a gas station attendant.
Yep.
He spent 25 years fixing cars, 17 years sweeping floors at JCPenney. He lived in a $12,000 house, and his main hobby was chopping firewood. Just a completely unassuming, quiet life. But when he died at age 92 in 2014, this humble janitor had a net worth of $8 million.
This is amazing.
He left $2 million to his stepkids and $6 million to his local hospital and library.
And he didn't win the lottery, right? He didn't inherit some secret trust fund.
No. He just saved what he could
Hmm.
and patiently invested it in blue-chip stocks for decades. And what blew my mind was reading that at the exact same time Red died, there was this Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an 18,000 square foot mansion who was declaring bankruptcy after losing everything in the 2008 crash.
The contrast is just poetic.
Reed succeeded because he possessed a low ego and immense patience. The executive lost because he was over-leveraged and greedy.
Well, Ronald Read intuitively understood the core lesson of these sources. Your survival depends entirely on defining your finish line before you reach it. You have to define a hard number.
Right.
There's this great story about John Bogle, the legendary founder of Vanguard. He was attending a party hosted by a billionaire hedge fund manager, and a friend pointed out to Bogle that the billionaire host made more money in a single day than Bogle had made in his entire lifetime.
Ouch.
Right. But Bogle's response was just brilliant. He said, yes, but I have something he will never have enough.
Wow.
Bogle's ego was completely immune to peer comparison.
I love that quote. But, okay, from a purely practical standpoint, enough sounds incredibly subjective. Like, how do you actually calculate a finish line when your peers are constantly upgrading their lifestyles?
That is exactly where Vicki Robbins' book, Your Money or Your Life, provides a rigid mathematical framework. She introduces this thing called the crossover point.
Crossover point.
Yes, this isn't some fuzzy, feel-good concept. It is the exact mathematical moment where the passive income generated by your investments, so your dividends, your bond interest, your rental income, surpasses your monthly living expenses.
Okay, so you track your spending.
You track every single cent you spend, you calculate the yield of your portfolio, and the moment that yield line crosses your expense line on a graph, the game fundamentally changes. You are functionally independent. You never have to trade an hour of your time for money again unless you actively choose to.
So if the math is that straightforward, why do you think so many incredibly smart, successful people absolutely refuse to define this number? Like, why don't high earners calculate their crossover point and just step off the treadmill?
The refusal to define a number comes down to something psychologists call the end of history illusion.
End of history illusion. What is that?
It is this profound cognitive bias where we blindly assume that our future desires will perfectly match our current desires.
Meaning, we think we are the finished product right now.
Precisely. The brain is what they call a cognitive miser. Projecting how your values, your tastes, and your desires will evolve over the next 20 years requires immense processing power. So the brain takes a shortcut.
It just assumes nothing changes.
Right. It assumes that whatever lifestyle you want today is the exact lifestyle you will want forever. So we refuse to define a hard number because we mistakenly believe that our capacity for wanting more will just, magically stop on its own once we get the next promotion or move into the next tax bracket.
We think satiation is a natural byproduct of wealth.
But it isn't. Your desires will scale aggressively with your income unless you consciously build a psychological wall to contain them.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, because people are terrified of building that wall.
Yes, they are.
Most high earners view putting a ceiling on their wealth as settling for less. They think defining enough means neutering their ambition or giving up the luxuries of life. But the sources reveal the exact opposite. Defining a ceiling actually unlocks the ultimate luxury.
Absolutely.
Because the highest dividend that money pays isn't a sports car or an exclusive zip code. It is the unadulterated control of your own time. Look at the research from Angus Campbell. He studied what actually drives human happiness, and he found that having a strong sense of controlling your life is the single most dependable predictor of positive well-being.
It's massive.
It beat out income, it beat out prestige, it beat out geography. True luxury is simply the ability to wake up and say, I can do whatever I want today.
And by placing a hard ceiling on your financial ambitions, you generate immense risk capacity.
Risk capacity.
Yeah. When you hit your crossover point and stop moving the goalposts, you stop taking ruinous, unnecessary risks to acquire things you don't actually need. You create what investors call a margin of safety. You leave deliberate room for error in your life.
Which you need because life is messy.
Exactly. There's a historical analogy that perfectly captures this need for a margin of safety. During World War II, at the Battle of Stalingrad, the German army had the most advanced, sophisticated tank units in the entire world.
Okay.
They had this massive unit of over 100 tanks sitting in reserve on the grasslands behind the front lines, ready to deploy. But when they were finally called into battle, almost none of them worked.
Wait, how does a fleet of advanced tanks just break down sitting in a field?
Because during their weeks of inactivity, field mice had nested inside the chassis and chewed completely through the electrical insulation.
Mice. You have got to be kidding me.
Mice. The German High Command had prepared for artillery, they had prepared for infantry assaults, and they had prepared for the brutal Russian winter. They did not prepare for mice.
That is unbelievable.
But it's true, and life is entirely unpredictable in the exact same way. You will inevitably encounter your own financial field mice, a medical emergency, a prolonged market crash, a sudden layoff. A financial ceiling knowing you're enough is what pays for the exterminator. It gives you the slack in the system needed to survive those mice without your entire life collapsing. The margin of safety isn't just about cash. It's about not requiring the world to go perfectly according to your plan.
Okay, I am completely sold on the necessity of this margin of safety. We understand the moving goalposts, we see the catastrophic terminal costs of not stopping, and we understand the freedom that a ceiling provides. But let's get ruthlessly practical for a minute.
Let's do it.
How do you, listening right now, actually execute this in your day-to-day life? How do we rewire our brains to stop chasing the next dollar?
Well, the foundational shift happens when you embrace a concept from your money or your life called life energy.
Life energy.
Yeah, Vicki Robbins' concept isn't just a basic budgeting trick. It is a profound mathematical recalculation of your reality. We tend to think of money as, numbers on a screen or paper in a wallet. It is not. Money is the literal finite hours of your existence that you irrevocably traded away.
So it's time.
It is time. And to calculate your true hourly rate, you don't just look at your salary. You have to subtract the taxes, the cost of the commute, the wardrobe you buy specifically for the office, and the money you spend decompressing from the stress of the job.
Oh man, when you deduct all that, your hourly rate plummets.
It plummets. And once you do that math, you realize that boasting a $1,000 phone isn't just spending $1,000. You're spending 2 or 3 weeks of your finite life energy.
That completely changes the calculus of every single purchase.
Totally.
You stop asking, can I afford this? And you start asking, is this object worth trading 3 weeks of my limited time on Earth?
It completely dismantles the impulse to buy things just to impress the stranger in the car next to you. And once you view your wealth as finite life energy, you can execute the strategy from Bill Perkins' book, Die with Zero.
Oh, I love this book.
It's so good. Perkins points out that the standard model of retirement planning is deeply flawed. We are told to hoard our wealth for what he calls the no-go years of late retirement, our 80s and 90s.
Right. Save everything for when you're old.
But the data unequivocally shows that spending drastically declines in those years, even when factoring in end-of-life healthcare.
Yeah.
By the time you have the massive pile of money, you no longer have the physical mobility or the energy to convert that money into meaningful experiences.
So his solution is to stop hoarding for a future where you can't even enjoy it, and instead divide your life into time buckets.
Yes. You map out your coming decades. You have the go-go years in your 50s and early 60s where you still have the physical health to hike, travel, and adventure.
Right.
You have the slow-go years in your 70s where you transition to lower-impact activities. You deliberately allocate your life energy to fund the experiences that are most appropriate for each specific bucket while you still possess the health to actually extract value from them.
This ties directly into Perkins' concept of the memory dividend.
Yes, explain that.
Well, when you buy a physical object, it begins depreciating the moment you walk out of the store. Right. It gets old, it gets dusty, it goes out of style. But when you purchase an experience, especially early in your life, it pays a memory dividend.
I love that framing.
Like you take a trip to Europe with your friends or a cross-country drive with your kids in your 40s, and you get to remember that experience for the next 40 years. You tell stories about it, you laugh about it at dinners. The value of that initial investment actually compounds over time.
It is literally compounding interest for your psychology. And Perkins demands that we apply this exact same logic to leaving a legacy.
Okay, how so?
Traditional estate planning dictates that you hoard your wealth and pass it on when you die. But let's look at the timeline. If you die at 85, your children will likely be in their late 50s or early 60s when they inherit your money.
Right, they're already nearing retirement themselves.
Exactly. They are already established in their careers, their kids are grown, their houses are likely paid off. The inheritance might be a nice bonus, but it does not fundamentally change their daily reality.
So if the goal is to actually help your kids, Hoarding until death is incredibly inefficient.
Highly inefficient. If you want to alter their trajectory, give them the money when they are 25 or 30.
When they actually need it.
Give it to them when they are struggling to scrape together a down payment for their first house, or when they are trying to afford to start a family, or when they need seed capital to launch a business. Transfer the wealth when it has the highest possible utility in their lives, rather than waiting for it to be a tax burden when they are approaching retirement themselves.
So what does this all mean for us? We have covered some pretty heavy psychological ground today.
We really have.
We've seen that true wealth isn't the sports car at the stoplight. It is what you don't see. It is the square footage not purchased, the upgrades ignored, the money saved that buys you options, and a margin of safety against the field mice of life.
Well said.
We've established that the brain's relative reward system makes satiation unnatural. More money doesn't cure the anxiety of wanting more, it usually just pours gasoline on the fire. And most importantly, we've learned that enough is a skill that must be actively practiced and enforced against the pressures of society.
It requires a fundamental shift in your operating system. You have to stop maximizing your dollars and start maximizing your fulfillment per hour of life energy spent.
Which brings us to our challenge for you, the listener. We want you to sit down this week and actually write out your enough framework. We want you to calculate hard numbers across 4 specific categories.
Grab a pen for this.
First, your annual lifestyle. What does it actually cost to live your ideal, comfortable life without trying to impress anyone else? Second, your security cushion. What is the exact cash number that provides your margin of safety? Third, your freedom fund. What is your mathematical crossover point where work becomes entirely optional? And fourth, your legacy goal. Who exactly do you want to help? At what specific age do you want to transfer that wealth to them to maximize its impact?
And if you cannot write those 4 numbers down, you are not building a financial plan. You are just playing a brutal, endless game of accumulation with absolutely no finish line. And as we saw with Rajat Gupta and Jesse Livermore, playing a game without a ceiling rarely ends well.
It really doesn't. And look, if you find the actual mechanics of calculating those numbers frustrating, our next deep dive is going to tackle exactly that. We are pivoting to personal finance contrarians.
Yes. We will be exploring why traditional budgeting frameworks fail for the vast majority of people, and what the behavioral science says you should actually be doing to manage your cash flow without driving yourself crazy.
I am really looking forward to that one. Tearing down the traditional spreadsheet budget completely flipped how I manage my own day-to-day spending.
It's going to be a good one. But before we go, this deep dive raises an important question for you to ponder.
Leave us with a thought.
We started by talking about Rajat Gupta, a man who had hundreds of millions of dollars, absolute freedom and complete security, yet threw it all away to chase 1 more million, ultimately losing his freedom in a federal prison. We all look at that and shake our heads at the absurdity of his choice. But if Vicki Robin is right, and every single dollar you spend is a direct, irreversible trade for your finite life energy, how many irreplaceable hours of your life are you willing to sacrifice today just to buy the temporary admiration of a complete stranger at a stop